Most people do not ruin their future because they chose the wrong person. They ruin it because they chose for the wrong reason. They chose emotion over structure. They chose intensity over stability. They chose love as a foundation instead of love as a reward. And if Niccolò Machiavelli were alive today, he would not ask you whether you are in love. He would ask you whether your decision will survive pressure. This is purely noetical. Here, we study power, strategy, and human behavior without illusion. We examine human nature the way it is, not the way we wish it to be. And today, we apply Machiavelli's realism almost entirely to one modern belief that sounds noble but can be dangerous: marry for love. In this video, you will understand why Machiavelli distrusted unstable emotions, why marriage is not merely romantic, but structural, why long-term stability depends on incentives, not feelings, why dependence weakens respect, and why building on love alone can create slow collapse. Stay until the end, because this topic is not emotional. It is strategic. This discussion is not anti-love. It is not bitterness. It is not an attack on marriage. It is a study of structure, stability, incentives, and long-term survival based mainly on Machiavelli's teaching about human nature and power. Love is not being rejected. Illusion is. In The Prince, Machiavelli studies rulers, alliances, loyalty, and power. He does not talk about romance. He talks about stability. He writes clearly that human beings are ungrateful, changeable, and guided by self-interest. He warns leaders never to rely only on affection, because affection depends on convenience. This is not pessimism. It is observation. Now, apply this directly to marriage. Marriage is not a short conversation. It is not a season of excitement. It is not a moment of attraction. Marriage is a long contract. It connects families. It combines money. It ties reputation. It affects children. It determines the direction of wealth and opportunity. Machiavelli would not ask, "Do you feel strongly?" He would ask, "Is this alliance stable under pressure?" Love is powerful. It can change the way a person thinks, sleeps, plans, and even sees the future. In its early stage, it feels intense and certain. People describe it as overwhelming, clear, and undeniable. It creates confidence. It creates hope. It creates attachment. But love changes. Modern psychological research has repeatedly shown that romantic intensity does not remain at its peak. Studies published in the journal Personal Relationships explain that passionate love, the kind driven by excitement and strong attraction, naturally declines after the early years of a relationship. What often replaces it is a calmer form of attachment, sometimes called companionate love. This calmer bond depends less on excitement and more on shared values, daily cooperation, trust, and stability. In simple terms, the strongest emotional phase is temporary. This does not mean love disappears. It means it transforms. The heat reduces, the excitement stabilizes, the constant emotional high settles into routine. Machiavelli would say this is exactly why you do not build a lifelong structure on it. In The Prince, he writes that it is safer to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. His reason is direct. Love is held by a bond of obligation, and people break that bond whenever it serves their interest. He is not attacking love. He is pointing out its weakness as a foundation. Love depends on feeling. Feeling depends on circumstance. Circumstance changes. This logic applies to rulers, but it also applies to individuals in marriage. When circumstances shift, emotions shift. Financial pressure changes emotion. When money becomes tight, stress rises, patience decreases. Small disagreements grow larger. Career stress changes emotion. Long hours, ambition, setbacks, or professional failure affect mood and behavior. What once felt charming can begin to feel irritating under pressure. Aging changes attraction. Physical appearance evolves over time. Energy levels shift. Health conditions appear. The excitement of youth is replaced with maturity, and sometimes with frustration. Opportunity changes perception. When new options appear, whether social, professional, or personal, people reassess what they have. Comparison begins. Gratitude can weaken. If a marriage is built only on strong feeling, then when feeling weakens, the structure weakens with it. This is not just philosophy, it is measurable. Across many developed nations, a significant portion of marriages end in divorce. In the United States, long-term data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that roughly 4 out of 10 marriages end in divorce. Many of these couples began with intense affection. Many described themselves as deeply in love at the beginning. Love was present, but presence of love at the start did not guarantee stability later. This is the pattern Machiavelli observed in political life. Loyalty based purely on affection fades when self-interest is threatened. The same pattern appears in personal life. When marriage is built only on emotion, and that emotion declines or is challenged by reality, the bond becomes fragile. Machiavelli would not be surprised by this outcome. He would simply say that human nature has not changed. People respond to pressure. People adjust to incentives. People react to changing circumstances. And anything built on unstable emotion must expect instability. That is why he would argue that love alone is not strong enough to carry a lifelong alliance. It can enrich it, it can warm it, it can make it meaningful, but it cannot carry it by itself. Machiavelli lived in a time when marriage was openly political. Powerful families did not pretend that marriage was only about affection. They arranged unions to secure land, protect influence, strengthen alliances, and preserve wealth. Marriage was a strategic decision. It was a way to stabilize position in an uncertain world. Modern people often believe they are different. They believe love alone separates them from the past. But even if the language has changed, the structure has not. Marriage still shapes power. It affects income stability. Two disciplined adults who cooperate financially often create more stability than two individuals operating separately. Shared planning reduces risk. Poor coordination increases it. It affects asset accumulation. Research from economic institutions such as the Federal Reserve and long-term household wealth studies show that married households, on average, accumulate more wealth over time than single households. Stability allows saving. Saving allows investment. Investment allows growth. When separation happens, assets divide and momentum slows. It affects child development. Large-scale studies in sociology and developmental psychology show that children raised in stable two-parent homes, on average, experience better educational and behavioral outcomes than those raised in unstable environments. Stability provides consistency. Consistency shapes development. It affects social capital. Marriage connects families, networks, reputations, and opportunities. It expands access to relationships that can influence careers, community standing, and long-term support systems. It even affects mental health outcomes. Research published in public health journals consistently shows that stable marriages are associated with lower rates of depression and stress compared to unstable or high-conflict unions. The key word is stable. Stability protects. Conflict erodes. All of this reveals one clear truth. Marriage is not only emotional, it is structural power. Thomas Piketty's long-term research on wealth demonstrates that capital compounds across generations. Wealth grows when it remains stable and protected. Marriage determines where that capital flows. It determines how resources are combined, preserved, or divided. It determines whether advantage expands or dissolves. This is structure. Machiavelli's entire philosophy centers on preserving structure against instability. In The Prince and Discourses on Livy, he warns leaders not to make decisions that feel noble in the moment, but weaken long-term security. He criticizes rulers who act based on appearance or emotion, while ignoring practical consequences. If a ruler chose an alliance based only on admiration or personal affection, without evaluating loyalty, strength, and long-term interest, Machiavelli would consider that dangerous. The same logic applies here. If you choose a partner based only on attraction, without examining discipline, financial behavior, conflict management, ambition, responsibility, and character under pressure, you are ignoring structure. Attraction does not reveal how someone behaves during loss. Romance does not reveal how someone manages debt. Charm does not reveal how someone responds to failure. Only time, stress, and pattern reveal that. Machiavelli would call the failure to evaluate these things negligence, not because love is wrong, but because ignoring structure invites instability. Marriage is one of the most powerful alliances you will ever enter. It merges identity, resources, future plans, and social standing. It shapes decades, not days. And Machiavelli never trusted decisions that ignored long-term consequences in favor of immediate feeling. He would not ask whether you are impressed. He would ask whether the alliance strengthens or weakens your foundation. Because in his worldview, anything that weakens structure eventually collapses. One of Machiavelli's clearest lessons is simple and direct. Judge people by what they consistently do, not by what they promise to become. In The Prince, he repeatedly warns rulers not to rely on words, appearances, or hopeful expectations. He explains that people act according to their interests, especially when they believe they can do so without serious consequence. When pressure disappears, true character appears. When opportunity arises, hidden motives surface. He advises leaders to assume that human beings will act in their own interest when circumstances allow it, not because people are evil, but because self-preservation and advantage are powerful forces. They guide behavior more reliably than noble speeches. Now apply that to marriage. Many people enter marriage believing that commitment will transform weakness into strength. They believe a wedding will create discipline, responsibility, patience, or ambition. They believe love will correct flaws. But modern psychology does not support that belief. Research on personality traits, including long-term studies based on the widely accepted 5-factor model of personality, shows that core personality patterns tend to remain relatively stable throughout adulthood. While people can grow, deep patterns such as impulsiveness, responsibility level, emotional control, and work ethic usually change slowly and with deliberate effort. They do not shift simply because of a ceremony. That means irresponsibility before marriage rarely becomes discipline after marriage. If someone avoids responsibility before commitment, commitment does not automatically create responsibility. If someone lacks self-control before marriage, marriage does not install self-control. If someone avoids conflict in unhealthy ways before marriage, those patterns often continue afterward. Machiavelli would say, do not expect transformation from ceremony. A wedding changes legal status. It does not change character. This is why he emphasizes observation over hope. He would advise you to evaluate incentives. What motivates this person? What pressures shape their decisions? How do they behave when there is no reward? He would advise you to evaluate patterns. Do they repeat the same mistakes? Do they show consistency and discipline? Do they manage money carefully over time, or only during short periods of inspiration? Most importantly, he would advise you to evaluate behavior during stress. Stress reveals what comfort hides. When finances tighten, does this person become reckless or focused? When conflict appears, do they communicate or withdraw? When ambition is challenged, do they grow or blame? Love often sees potential. It sees what someone could become. It focuses on intention. Strategy sees pattern. It studies what someone repeatedly does. Machiavelli trusted pattern more than promise. He would argue that the person you marry is not the version you imagine in the future. It is the version you consistently observe in the present, because human nature does not change simply because vows are spoken. It changes slowly, with effort, discipline, and incentive. And without those forces, it usually remains the same. Machiavelli repeatedly warns rulers about one danger above many others: dependence. In The Prince, he criticizes leaders who rely heavily on mercenaries. Why? Because mercenaries fight for payment, not loyalty. When payment stops or danger increases, they withdraw. A ruler who depends entirely on them loses control. His power rests in hands he does not fully command. He also warns princes not to depend completely on other powers for protection. The moment your stability rests entirely on someone else's strength, your authority weakens. You may still hold the title, but you no longer hold control. This principle is not limited to politics. It applies directly to relationships. In relationships, extreme emotional dependence creates imbalance. When one partner becomes the emotional center of the other's entire identity, power shifts. If one person feels they cannot function, decide, or remain stable without the other, the relationship stops being equal. It becomes one-sided. Respect begins to decline when independence disappears. Respect is closely tied to strength. Strength does not mean harshness. It means self-control, direction, and the ability to stand on your own. When someone loses that independence, they often become anxious, overly attached, or fearful of loss. That fear changes behavior. It can lead to over-pleasing, insecurity, or emotional pressure. Over time, this imbalance affects attraction. Modern relationship research supports this. Studies in relationship psychology consistently show that couples who maintain individual identity and healthy autonomy report higher long-term satisfaction than couples who lose boundaries and merge completely. Partners who continue personal growth, maintain friendships, pursue goals, and preserve self-respect tend to experience more stable and satisfying unions than those who rely entirely on each other for emotional survival. In simple terms, two whole individuals form a stronger bond than two dependent halves. Machiavelli understood this principle centuries ago without access to surveys or data. He understood that power requires autonomy. A ruler who cannot stand independently cannot command respect. A person who cannot stand independently cannot maintain balance in a partnership. Attraction also requires strength. Strength here does not mean dominance. It means stability. It means confidence that does not collapse under pressure. It means the ability to make decisions without fear of abandonment. If love makes you abandon your goals, silence your standards, neglect your discipline, or surrender your identity, then love is no longer strengthening you. It is weakening you. And weakness creates imbalance. Machiavelli would not advise emotional isolation. He would advise controlled attachment. He would encourage partnership without surrendering self-control. Because once balance disappears, power shifts. And when power shifts too far in one direction, stability suffers. Love should add to your strength, not replace it. If it replaces it, you are building dependence. And dependence, in Machiavelli's view, is the beginning of loss. When Machiavelli speaks about fear, many people misunderstand him. He is not praising cruelty. He is not encouraging harshness for its own sake. He is speaking about consequence. In The Prince, when he says it is safer to be feared than loved if one cannot be both, he explains that fear is maintained by a clear awareness of consequences. People may stop feeling affection, they may stop feeling gratitude, but they rarely ignore predictable consequences. Fear, in his argument, is not terror. It is seriousness. It is clarity about limits. It is understanding that actions produce results. For Machiavelli, stability comes from predictable structure and clear boundaries. A ruler who sets clear rules, applies them consistently, and avoids unnecessary cruelty creates order. A ruler who relies only on being admired creates uncertainty. Admiration changes. Structure endures. Now apply this to marriage. In marriage, fear does not mean intimidation. It means clear expectations and consistent standards. It means both partners understand what is acceptable and what is not. It means mutual accountability. Each person knows that actions have impact. Promises are not empty. Words are supported by behavior. It means financial transparency. Money is one of the most common sources of conflict in marriage. When finances are hidden, mismanaged, or unclear, distrust grows. When finances are discussed openly and managed with discipline, stability increases. It means shared long-term goals. Where are you building? What are you working toward? Without shared direction, partners move at different speeds toward different destinations. It means defined standards of behavior. How do you handle conflict? How do you speak during disagreement? What boundaries protect the relationship? Without standards, emotion controls reactions. With standards, discipline controls reactions. Where structure exists, stability grows. Where only emotion exists, uncertainty grows. If two people wake up each day guided only by how they feel in the moment, the relationship will rise and fall with mood. Some days will be warm, others will be cold. There will be no anchor. Machiavelli always preferred stability over admiration. A ruler admired but unstable is vulnerable. A ruler respected and structured is secure. In marriage, admiration without stability fades. Compliments do not prevent conflict. Attraction does not solve financial strain. Passion does not replace discipline. But structure protects both partners. It creates safety. It creates predictability. It reduces chaos. Machiavelli would argue that love becomes stronger inside structure, not weaker. When boundaries are clear and expectations are known, emotion has space to grow without fear of collapse. Stability does not remove warmth. It protects it. And in Machiavelli's world, protection always came before praise. Modern culture glorifies intensity. It says if it feels strong, it must be right. But intensity is not durability. Fire burns bright. Stone lasts longer. Machiavelli would choose stone. Pause and ask yourself honestly, if emotion disappeared for a year, would this partnership still make practical sense? If the answer is uncertain, you are building on hope. Machiavelli never built on hope. The lesson is not do not love. The lesson is do not let love be the only qualification. Marry where there is shared discipline, shared ambition, shared long-term direction, mutual respect, emotional control, financial responsibility. Then love becomes strength inside structure. Without structure, love becomes risk. Machiavelli teaches realism. He teaches preparation for human weakness. He teaches stability over illusion. Marriage is one of the most powerful alliances you will ever form. Treat it like an alliance, not a fantasy. If you understand this principle, comment. Structure before emotion. Subscribe to Purely Noetical, because here we build clarity slowly. And clarity compounds. Return to this lesson when emotion feels overwhelming. Revisit it when attraction blinds judgment. Study it when pressure appears. Power is not built in moments of passion. It is built in moments of clear thinking. And clear thinking begins when illusion ends.